On the other side, you have the more narcissistic development, and that's when you got the message. These are theories. I'm not sure if it's 100% correct, but that's what we know up until now. There's different theories. But as a baby or young child, you weren't attended to your needs sufficiently. At some point, you concluded, I cannot trust others for care. Simple. I'm not worthy enough for care. And then the defense develops, you know what? I don't need you. I can only trust myself. So I'm more important than you are, and you are less important than I am. And that's the narcissistic shield. And these people trust themselves more than others.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you are stepping into who you are meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Stephanie Carinia, and that's Dr. Stephanie Carinia. And she is a clinical psychologist, and she specializes in trauma and personality, and especially dealing and healing from narcissistic relationships. And I felt this was so on point because I have had a lot of clients lately. This is kind of something that they're working through with their therapist. And I feel like this is coming up so often as people are kind of diving into self-discovery and kind of self-development and realizing that they have in fact been the victim of narcissistic abuse and have been in narcissistic relationships. And so Dr. Stephanie is going to talk to us about that today and what that looks like. And she's also going to dive into a couple other things because she does work with personality and just trauma in general. We want to talk about family trauma and the mother wound and how that shows up in our lives and how that shows up with how we relate to our mother or mother figure, how that relates to other people in our lives, and just how that translates into other relationships. I'm totally fascinated by this. I'm really fascinated by anything psychology related and how the brain works. It's completely fascinating. And Dr. Stephanie really breaks it down, what it looks like with relationships and codependency and all of that. So I'm excited for y'all to hear this and to really kind of uncover some layers that you may not know are kind of hidden in your subconscious based on trauma that you've experienced in your life. So let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie, and we are talking about a whole different conversation on mental health today. And I love these topics. We haven't brought them on the show yet. And I'm really excited to bring Dr. Stephanie's insight to y'all. So thank you so much for joining me tonight for you. She's in the Netherlands. So thanks for jumping on in the evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's just to give, I guess, a little background of kind of leading into the topics that we're going to talk about today. Can you just kind of give the listeners an idea of what you do and kind of what your area of focus is?
Yes. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and I focus on trauma and personality mainly. So my specialty is hidden trauma. So the family dynamics, things that are not that visible, but affect the way we develop and interact with the world and our relationships.
Yeah. And super important. And that's why I like this conversation, because we haven't talked about this specific kind of side of psychology. And it's interesting because I feel like, all of this is like divine timing, because I have a few clients right now that are kind of working through their own trauma from narcissistic relationships, some parenting, some like other extended relationships. And so, obviously I'm not a psychologist, and so I'm not giving them therapy per se, but to help, we do nervous system work and kind of some trauma work. And so I find this conversation really fascinating because I think people underestimate the physical toll because like you said, they're like hidden things, right? The things in relationships are not things we see like physically. And I think people underestimate the physical toll that these kind of things take on the body, right?
Yeah, can. It depends on the person, right. But yes, can take a toll on us.
Yeah, for sure. And so I want to kind of start first talking about, because I kind of want to talk about like parenting relationships and that kind of thing. So can you explain what the mother wound is and how that shows up?
So you need to see it like this. the child is born without a sense of self. So there's no self-worth, there is no self-awareness, there's nothing. And the child needs to develop that. The child needs to develop the idea, the belief that they are worthy of receiving love and care, of belonging. So hidden trauma, for instance, what I'm posting on, or complex trauma, is when we end up feeling irrelevant and not included. So that's very important for people to develop that for children. And the mother has a very special part in that. Father too, but in a different way, in a later stage. So that's why I'm posting so much on the effects of the mother and the mother wound. So when the mother hasn't fully been able to mature herself due to own dysfunctional dynamics, not a secure upbringing, she might not be able to attend to the child's emotional needs that much, or even the primary needs sometimes. And the child, the baby, for instance, the child gets the message, I cannot rely on the care. There might be, hidden trauma developing already. So the effect can be that the child grows up feeling unworthy or fearing to be abandoned, for instance, fearing rejection. And some cases, so in the more extreme cases, it can develop towards dependency or codependency, depending on how the parent interacted with the child. In other cases, it can develop to narcissism, for instance. So with the dependency, we trust other people more than we trust ourselves. We believe that we cannot make ourselves happy because of things that have happened. That's the reason that we have developed that. So what we do, instead of investing in ourselves, it makes more sense to invest in the other person, because that person can make us happy, can meet our needs. So it's logical that if we've learned that we cannot meet our own needs, we will not invest in ourselves, right? We will make sure to people please, to make sure and to manipulate in a way for them to love us. So that's where the dependency comes from and the codependency comes from. On the other side, you have the more narcissistic development, and that's when you got the message. These are theories. I'm not sure if it's 100% correct, but that's what we know up until now. There's different theories. But if as a baby or young child, you weren't attended to your needs sufficiently, at some point you concluded, I cannot trust others for care. Simple. I'm not worthy enough for care. And then the defense develops, you know what? I don't need you. I can only trust myself. So I'm more important than you are, and you are less important than I am. And that's the narcissistic shield. And these people trust themselves more than others.
Right.
So that's why codependency and narcissism fits in well together, and trauma bonding can develop. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. Well, and I think a lot of times, I'm sure you see this a lot, right? This like mother wound, and kind of however the relationship transpires, it carries on into other relationships, right? And so now we have these codependent relationships with a partner or a spouse, or maybe your own children, right? It carries on to other relationships, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because it starts with a relationship with yourself, and in combination with how your parent interacted with you. For instance, if you have had a codependent parent, then you already have a codependent relationship.
Right.
So then you already got the message from a young age, there is no self. No self. Boundaries is an insult. We don't do that. You don't reject me. What, do you need time for yourself? Are you nuts? Are you going to leave me alone? And then, so you learn to need each other to basically be.
Right.
And then the child doesn't get to develop their own self. So, yeah. And that is tricky when you depend on the other person liking you, because that's when you have a narcissistic parent, because that's when you grow up looking for similar partners who will be judging you, and you will just be looking for their approval. And of course, then you will also be susceptible to gaslighting,
right?
Because you won't be trusting your own judgment anymore. You will be focusing on getting their approval instead of identifying the tactics and checking in with yourself to see, hey, wait a minute, do I feel respected?
Right.
So I also always say childhood trauma leaves us focus on being accepted rather than respected, focus on being wanted rather than being valued.
Yes. That was answering my question, because I was going to ask like the internal sign. And I love that, being accepted rather than being respected. What are some signs of, you talk about this a lot on your social media and you do such a good job of giving like examples, but when we're looking at like you mentioned gaslighting, what does that look like? Like specific things? Because I think a lot of times too, because I know when I'm reading your posts, a lot of times you're like, man, some of this stuff is like so almost subliminal, like you don't realize it's happening, right? So what are some of the signs of gaslighting, or like conversations that are had that, okay, like this is gaslighting. Hold on a second.
Yeah. So first of all, it would be great if you would be able to tap into your feelings, because your intuition can guide you perfectly.
Totally.
Because something's off. For instance, if your partner cheats on you and you confront them with that, and your partner says, well, listen, you made me do it because, you're so busy with all your things, or you have your emotional problems that at some point I was fed up with it.
Right.
Something's off with that answer to most people. And then the point is not, is it correct or not? Is there an element of truth in it? Perhaps there is. I don't know. But that's beside the point.
Right.
The point is, are you insulting my intelligence? Right? And this is a clear form of insulting of the intelligence, because then you could say, listen, if you were unhappy with the attention that I was giving you, couldn't you then discuss that with me? Perhaps we can work it out. So it's like twisting things. Yep. So there's different strategies with gaslighting. And the other is just making you doubt yourself. It continuously make you doubt yourself and your intentions. So normal behavior would be, I don't like to say to someone, I didn't like that you, talk to that person, for instance. Okay. You left me alone, whatever. That is confronting the behavior. But with gaslighting, they want to make you question yourself. So they will doubt your intentions. They won't say, I didn't like that you talked to that person. That made me feel insecure, because that's a legit thing to say. They would say, you were flirting. You were making me jealous. So they're already defining your reality and what your intentions were, which is a trick. It's a mind game, basically. Right. And the whole purpose, because the term gaslighting has been used a lot and often inappropriately, because being belittled, for instance, minimizing your feelings, that can be gaslighting, but not necessarily. The purpose of gaslighting is to control you, to make you lose the trust in yourself. So a real gaslighter or an emotional abuser, their purpose is to control you. And the best way to control someone, better than physical abuse even, is to take away their self-trust, the trust in their own judgment and their own worth.
That's huge. Well, and it's like you said at the beginning, like to understand what gaslighting is for yourself, you have to listen to your intuition. And if you're in an unhealthy relationship like that, you're already questioning it within that relationship. So it's like this vicious cycle, right? Like constantly questioning, like, am I the crazy one? Am I I think that's a huge revelation, is that it's like, it's just you questioning yourself, right? That's what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in a healthy relationship, it will leave you feeling secure and empowered. An unhealthy relationship, the person will leave you doubting yourself and insecure.
Right. Totally. Well, and I think it's the other thing I find really interesting, and you've talked about this on your social media. By the way, I'll put links, of course, but y'all need to follow her on social media, because she does such a good job of educating and informing about all of these things. But you talk about, because I think what intrigues me is, I think a lot of times we think about codependent relationships with like a partner or a spouse. A lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times. Same thing with gaslighting. But a lot of times, like you were talking about, it starts from a parent-child relationship and it just kind of carries over. And you made a post a while back. You were talking about covert narcissists. and how like sometimes it's not as blatant, right? Because then I think that's the thing with narcissism. I think there is some maybe misinterpretations of what that word means, of what a narcissist is, because it's not always like in your face blatant, right? Like there's these kind of like, you said covert. So can you talk a little bit about that? And especially when we're looking, because I think specifically you were talking about a parent. And I find, and the reason I like the parent relationship is because I really feel like this is what carries over into like our relationships as adults, is these relationships, obviously we have with caregivers, parents, or whatever. And I think that's like a good foundation to kind of unravel and like peel back the layers of like your relationships with caregivers growing up. So anyway, can you just kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Yes. So for instance, with the covert narcissistic mom, yeah, and that's a tricky one. Because at least when you have an overt narcissistic mom, overt, in your face, at least it's not fun.
Right.
But at least it's out there.
You can see visible. It. Right.
Yeah. People won't say, you have such a sweet mother. Right?
So true.
They will say, geez, how are you putting up with this? At least there's it's clear. You can work with it. You can do something with it. Don't get me wrong. It has its own problems, but still. Covert narcissistic profile is very tricky because this amazing, selfless mom, the Mother Teresa, she is always there for you. She sacrificed her life. By the way, there's different types within the covert variant. So it's not, so when I'm describing one, it doesn't mean automatically then that's not covert narcissism if it's different. But for instance, this is the prototype. It's this amazing, great person. And you will find yourself unable to be angry with her because the common trait of narcissism is a low self-worth and they're not aware of it. Mm-hmm. So they feel that they're amazing. The overt narcissistic mom, she's this amazing, great, charismatic person on top of the world, knows everything, knows it all. The covert version is the self-sacrificing type. I do everything for my sacrifice, my life. I'm always nice. How can you be angry with me? So you cannot be angry with her. She will make you feel like crazy. Like, how can I be mad with her? Look at her. She's this. But that is a problem because, first of all, we're human, so we make mistakes.
Right.
And that is normal. That is healthy. So when a child needs to be able to see reality, and when the mother then denies anything because she's amazing, she meant well, because her ego needs to be, good. She needs to be the good mother because a narcissistic person doesn't have the capacity to take ownership because they feel that will touch their unworthiness they're not in touch with. So that's too painful. So their defense mechanism is going to fight. I don't understand how you can say that about me. I meant well. Aren't you ungrateful for what I did? So you find yourself being like, oh my God, I don't know, your needs are totally invalidated and your boundaries.
Right.
And that's very confusing to a child. Also, then there is often the punishment. So the narcissist, unfortunately, because of the low self-worth, will interpret everything you say as an insult. If you have a boundary or this, or you just say, Mom, I didn't like that you did this. To them, it feels like saying, Mom, you're the worst person in the world. You suck. You're worthless. That's what they hear. But of course, they know that you didn't say that like in that way. They know that they cannot punish you. So they might punish you in a covert way. The silent treatment is the classic one. You're going to pay. Or another one, when you just say something that you didn't like, start crying. You start crying. So the mom starts crying.
Right.
Like, I can't believe that you said that. And then that's the punishment. Like how basically saying, subtitles now, the unconscious subtitles, the invisible subtitles, how dare you? Mm-hmm. How dare you?
Right.
Set a boundary. How dare you said that you didn't like what I do? How dare you? So that's a punishment with the purpose for you to not ever dare to do that again. Mm-hmm. And so you go walking on eggshells.
Right. And then too, I imagine it gets to a point where, you have trouble sharing your feelings, because obviously you can't share like your real feelings with this mother figure, right? And so I imagine that carries over to other relationships, right? Well, I don't feel comfortable sharing my feelings and my opinions because this is how my mom treated me and my mom made me feel bad if I disagreed with her, whatever. And so I imagine that translates into other relationships, right?
Absolutely. Especially when you consider that as a child with the object relations theory, when the child will perceive other people the way they perceive their parent,
right?
Because they don't know the difference. They think, if my parents are that way, the whole world is that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we grow up interacting in that same way. So yes, we will think twice before we set a boundary.
Right.
Yes, because we will believe that that person will be upset. We will feel responsible. Other types of mom, for instance, a mom with a more borderline structure, if you grow up with that, you will feel selfish, for instance, often because you haven't been meeting her needs.
Right.
And then you feel that you're always responsible for other people's needs, for not upsetting them, because that parent really felt that the child was responsible for making them feel good.
Right.
So you grow up believing I'm responsible for upsetting other people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I should make sure to not do that. So these people also struggle with boundaries, for instance.
Right. Yes. Boundaries. That's huge too. Well, and I know I've had a few clients over the years. A couple are specifically dealing with like narcissistic relationships. And there's one that like this picture you're painting is like exactly the picture of her mom that she's talked to me about. And so I think, and maybe you have experience with this with clients that you work with, because like her biggest thing was, because she has kids as well. Like, how do I not be like that? Like, how do I break the cycle? Right? Like, how do I not turn into that? Because like you're saying, most of the time, I don't know if it's all the time, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like narcissists don't know they're narcissists, right? Like it's not like a conscious thing.
No.
So they don't see anything wrong with their behavior. So, and that was my client's, she's like, well, how do I not become that?
Yeah. I love that question. And I love that she asked herself that question. Mm-hmm. Not many people do that. Mm-hmm. It's a very tough question to ask because we don't notice our own toxicity.
Right.
We just don't see it, right? It's not like, now I'm doing this toxic thing. Exactly. Now I'm doing this. It's invisible to us. It's invisible because, it's our way of coping. We don't see the difference. What is healthy? What is unhealthy?
Right.
But with other people, we can see it because we can feel it, what they're doing. We're like, ow, that hurts. Ow, right. That's not cool. So yeah. And we forget, especially our defense mechanism might make us forget that we are flawed as well. And yes, you betcha that if you grew up with such a mother or such a parent, you will have wounds of your own.
Right.
And with wounds come defense mechanisms. And the defense mechanisms are what hurts other people. And don't get me wrong, don't forget that not expressing what we need to other people also hurts other people because then we aren't authentic with them. If we don't say what we like to the other person, we're lying. We are preventing that person of taking action and changing their behavior towards us to make us happy. Mm-hmm. So we're denying that person an authentic connection when we are not fully expressing ourselves. So yes, to come back to your question, how do we know if we have toxic behavior? How do we spot that? I think that the best thing that we can do is just start reflecting. First of all, how our behavior makes other people feel. Mm. If another person is upset with what we do, how do we go about that? Of course, with the codependent type, it might be good to not pay that much attention because these people need to pay less attention to other people and more to themselves.
Right.
But of course, if you don't pay that much attention to the effect that your behavior has on others, take that into account. If you do the silent treatment often, start educating yourself on that. Yeah, I think become aware. Mm-hmm. Try to be a little bit more susceptible to open to feedback. And that's it, basically. The only thing that we can do is become curious also towards ourselves instead of judgmental.
Right, for sure. Well, and I think in awareness, I talk about this a lot in all aspects. That's the biggest thing, right? It's awareness, like being aware of your feelings and your emotions and all of that. It's the awareness piece is huge. And I think you brought up a good point earlier talking about boundaries. And I think that's a hard one, at least in my experience with my clients. That's a hard one for people, especially when I know, I'm guilty of this. I've like for a long time, I was a people pleaser and I didn't want to make people, and I'm sure, there's things that came from, but when you have that awareness piece, when you're becoming more aware of like, okay, hold on, I'm letting people talk to me a certain way, the respect thing, like you were talking about earlier, I guess, what are some steps, or do you have like suggestions on steps people can take to start to set those boundaries? Because I mean, I know, especially someone dealing with like a really serious codependent or narcissistic relationship, like that's a hard thing to just be like, oh, wait, no, now I'm going to set boundaries. Like it's not that simple. So do you have some ways that people can start to do that?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand with boundaries that sometimes it's not that easy. For some people, their identity is tied to approval. It's like tied to approval.
Right.
And what I mean with identity is tied to means your right to exist, your sense of worthiness, your right to exist is literally tied. That's how it feels, to that other person liking you. If that other person doesn't like you, especially when you grew up with a narcissistic mother, you will have that with other people.
Right.
It feels as if you are nothing. So it's very important to just have to understand that and to not be so hard on yourself when it's so hard to set a boundary, because then we understand much better why it's so terrifying to set a boundary. Because if you lose, to be able to set a boundary, you need to, I posted once on this, you need to be prepared to lose the connection.
Yeah.
Just like when you want to have a connection with someone, to be vulnerable, you need to be prepared to face a possible rejection.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You cannot be vulnerable without the possibility of rejection.
Right.
You cannot set a boundary and thereby stay connected to yourself, your authentic self, without the risk of losing the connection, their approval.
Yep.
Period. That's just the way it is.
Right.
So that's the tough part. So that's why a lot of people need to do first that inner work to feel secure within themselves, understand that, to connect to their inner parent, their inner adult, and understand they are not anymore only the child,
right?
The wounded child. They're not only that inner child. They're not that helpless child anymore. They now have the inner adult that's holding them. So if they lose the other person's approval, don't worry. You have your inner adult. You have your own back. So some people need to work first on that. And in my account, I post on how to deal with your family, how to heal from your family, how to deal with your family to be able to also have healthy other relationships. And what's important there is to understand a couple of things with setting boundaries. Normally, emotionally mature people respect your boundaries. Not only respect them, they need you to have your boundaries.
Right.
Okay? They might not trust you if you always say yes. They might be like, okay. So apparently it's people don't trust people pleasers.
Right.
Because you cannot trust them for them to tell you the truth, right?
Right. How they really feel. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to understand that when setting boundaries, normally a person would appreciate you setting the boundary. An emotionally immature person will make a fuss. And that's what you need to understand. And that's fine. Allow them to make a fuss.
Right.
When you have a little child, a 5-year-old, and you have said to the child, you can have 1 or 2 cookies, and that's it. And then the child goes to the jar, take a 3rd or a 4th cookie. What are you going to do? Are you going to not set a boundary? Then the child is going to throw a tantrum.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then what are you going to do? I'm just going to give the 3rd cookie and the 4th cookie and the 5th cookie. You're going to allow the child to have the tantrum, right?
The tantrum. That's right.
Yeah. Allow them to disapprove. So allow the adult parent or the person that you're with, allow them to have the tantrum. Of course, be kind in the way you set a boundary. We're not going to be mean. We're going to say, hey, listen, I really need to honor myself. And I would really like to see you, not today, perhaps another time. So I cannot make it, I cannot make an appointment with you I cannot promise that. And then allow them, well, you're so selfish, you're so this, you're so that. And after all I've done for you, I'm very sorry that I'm hurting you right now, but let's continue this conversation some other time then. Allow them to disapprove of you. And that's, I think, the main problem that many people have. They struggle to allow the other person to not like them.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I know that was me being like the people pleaser as well. It's like, well, I want everybody to like me. So, it's totally what it is.
Did you experience that? Was it hard for you for people to not approve or not like you?
Totally. Yeah. And I think, honestly, I think it wasn't until my husband and I got together, he was very emotionally mature. And I had not been in a relationship like that with somebody who was emotionally mature. And so I think that helped me to realize like, okay, he feels okay sharing his feelings and he's comfortable sharing his feelings and tell me how he feels. Like, okay, maybe it is safe to share how I really feel and not just go along with, like, I think for me, it required me like being in a relationship and seeing like, okay, this is a normal relationship where we can openly share, how we feel and not just go along with it because we don't want somebody else to get mad, So yeah, I mean, I totally had that experience.
And maturing, glad to hear that. It must be such a nice feeling, right?
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
And maturing is also the ability to find a person in your life, to choose people in your life that make you feel safe
Exactly.
and comfortable and secure.
Right.
And some people might struggle with that. And that can also have to do with their own childhood wounds that they need to repair through a similar rejecting other. If they had a rejecting partner, a parent, they might look out unconsciously for a rejecting partner to be able to repair that wound.
Right.
And then they get stuck in these types of unavailable, rejecting partners. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think I had early on in the show, I had somebody, we talked about like inner child wounds and that kind of thing, but you mentioned it just briefly, but I think and I'd love to get just your take on this, just getting a clinical take on it, like how to walk people through that piece. Cause I think like you said, like at some point as an adult, you have to realize like, I am an adult, like I'm a mature adult and I'm no longer this like wounded child that was in this, whatever relationship. But again, kind of like the piece where it's not that simple. It's just being like, oh, okay, I'm okay now. So do you have, again, I guess like more tangible things, like how to kind of walk people through, like, I don't know if inner child healing is what you want to call it, but just walking through kind of that piece and being like, I'm okay knowing that I'm an adult, I'm not this wounded child. And how do you walk people through that?
Well, of course, that's also why therapy can be so important because it is complicated.
Right.
We should not make it too oversimplified.
Right.
But in essence, it's developing yourself, your sense of self, the trust in other. Some people have a good sense of self, but then they need to trust other people. So in a community, you can start learning to share more vulnerable things. Is your question basically, how do we heal?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I think to heal means to be able to function, to be able to be happy, to be able to connect authentically, not only from our conditioned self, our role self, the pleaser, the this, the that, the fixer, the macho, but being able to be vulnerable, to be able to authentically connect, to show when we don't like something, to attract people in our lives that treat us with respect, that leave us feeling secure. So, and we attract those people when we are able to find that also within ourselves. So we need to find that inner stability and security within ourselves. And some people keep running away from themselves, the dependent type. Just runs away from themselves toward someone else to save them.
Right.
And they need to make the transition to really connect to their inner adult to understand that they're safe now. As long as the inner child doesn't hear from their inner adult, you're okay, you're with me, we're okay. The inner child will be running and doing destructive things and will be looking for love in the wrong places.
Right.
So it's making that connection as well.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's super helpful. And I think, like you said, that's why they're therapists, right? Like that's why talk therapy exists, like being able to talk and have somebody with, an objective viewpoint kind of walk you through all of that. And I think that's like, I can't emphasize that enough to people because I feel like, and especially with my clients that I'm working with, both of them, or the two that I'm talking about, both of them, it took them a while to do therapy. I don't know, actually there's 3 of them now and one of them is a different relationship, but I think it took them a while because they're like, oh, well, I'll just deal with it myself. And it just wasn't working out for them that way, like trying to deal with it themselves. So I think emphasizing the point that that's why these modalities exist. Like that's why like people like you, a clinical psychologist, like this is that's the whole reason. It's like having someone like walk alongside you on your healing journey. Like you don't have to do it by yourself.
Especially since we can only heal through an attachment, a safe attachment.
Yes.
So it can also be a healing community if you don't have access to a therapist. And by the way, as for therapy, group therapy is also amazing. You learn things in group. A group therapy is basically, it's a small society. So you get to experiment in a small society. So it's amazing. So all your people-pleasing tendencies, all the more narcissistic tendencies, everything, you can deal with that within a safe attachment, a safe community. So that's great. And the people that don't tend to look for help or want to do it on their own might be the ones who are the more avoidant types in general. The people who learn from a young age, I cannot trust on others, so I have to rely on myself. Those people will struggle to be more vulnerable in general, to rely on other people, including therapists. So when these people come into therapy, they might be there in the beginning because they really have to, because they really are becoming depressed, or there's really a relationship problem, or there's really something. And then you will see as soon as they're getting a little bit better, they're out. They're gone. Yeah. So they try to rely as least as possible on another person. And healing is the ability to be able to also rely on each other. Interdependence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you brought up the group therapy community. I mean, it is because we do need community. I mean, I think that's you are able to walk through things where you don't feel like you're alone or you're the only one going through this. And I love that. So that's such a good option for people, knowing that that option is out there is the group therapy. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your insight on this. This is such an important conversation. And again, I feel like, especially in my world, I see like the physical like effects of what all of these relationships and these things have done to people. And so I think it's important to understand the different aspects of these types of relationships. And like the awareness piece is huge that we've talked about, being aware and being able to recognize it in your own relationships within yourself. Like it's such a huge piece. So I love this conversation with you. I do have one other question that I always like to finish with. But before I do that, can you just tell everybody the best place to find out more about you, what you're doing, working with you, all of those things?
Yeah. So check out my Instagram account. I'm there, posting there. It's my community over there. Psychologist Stephanie. And also I'm automatically also posting on Facebook, if you're on Facebook. And check out my website, psychologiststephanie.com, for courses, a self-empowerment course, my free inner healing course. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
So good. So good. I love it. And you had, I don't know if I saw this a while back, you had what was the course? You had something about self-discovery, what was it?
Self-empowerment.
Self-empowerment. That's the one. Yeah. Yes, that's the one. Yes. Yes. So y'all go check that out because I saw you posting about that one. Okay. So the last question that I want to ask you is, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
I think it's a difficult one because I'm not sure if we necessarily would need a purpose. I can understand that it can be, sorry, now I'm giving you a long answer.
No, it's good. This is good. I like it.
Okay. Just because I'm a little bit, we need to be careful with, you need to have a purpose.
Right. Yes.
Because then some people can get lost in that and panic. Shit, I don't have a purpose. So is my life worthless?
Yep. 100%.
So yeah. And then you get the people who say, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm the doctor. Yes. So then there's no identity. It's tied to so yeah, I think to be free, to be able to discover what is important to us, how we can just be, that would be already be, and make sure to not just have a purpose because you need to, but definitely if there's something that connects to you authentically, that's great. That's amazing.
I love that. It was such a good answer because that's like the clinical psychologist answer for that question. So it's like actually perfect. So I love it. I love it. No, it's such a good point. Well, and you brought up a good point because I think that is true. And I did a masterclass one time and the girl was talking about that. We get so tied up into like, I got to find my purpose. And it's like this like futile search. And then, like you said, your identity becomes attached to something where it's like, you can't just be. So no, So I love that answer. It was so good.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie. I appreciate your time and for staying up late with us and for sharing all of your insight. Y'all go give her a follow on Instagram. She is teaching a lot of great stuff. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much too. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's at The Hope Pedraza, or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.